जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी। यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजना। यमुना तीरावनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे। हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Nitai Go Premanande. Gantha Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anand Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. All glories to somebody. All glories to some devotees. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiriyet Shavatam Swakatha Krishna Punya Shavana Kirtanaha Hridayantasto Hyabhadrani Vidunoti Suhasatam Nashtaprayasha Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavti Nashtiki. Hare Krishna. So today we'll be covering Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 6th canto, chapter 13. King Indra afflicted by a sinful reaction. So in the previous class, we covered Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 6th canto chapter 12, Vritrasu's glorious death, where King Indra was able to kill Vritrasur. And realizing that he was a great devotee, there are some reactions that will be discussed in this chapter. So let's cover the very first two verses of this chapter. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 6th canto chapter 13 verse 1. Shri Shuka Uvacha Vritre hate trayo loka Vinashakrena bhurida Sapala he abhavan sadhyo Vijvara nivratendriyaha. Shri Shuka Uvacha. Shri Shukdev Goswami said, Vritre hate. When Vritrasur was killed, Trayaha Lokaha, the three planetary systems, upper, middle and lower, Vina, except Shakrena, Indra, who is also called Shakra, Bhurida, O Maharaj Parikshit, giver of great charity, Sapalaha, with the rulers of the various planets. He, indeed, Abhavan, became, Sadhyaha, immediately, Vijvaraha, without fear of death, Nirvrta, very much pleased, Indriyaha, whose senses. Translation by His Divine Grace S.B. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Shri Shukdev Goswami said, O King Parikshit, who are so charitably disposed, when Vritrasur was killed, all the presiding deities and everyone else in the three planetary systems was immediately pleased and free from trouble. Everyone, that is, except Indra. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 6th canto chapter 13 verse 2. Devashi Pitra Bhutani Daitya Devanugaha Swayam Prati Jagmu Swadrishrani Brahmeshendriyadayastataha. Deva, demigods, Rishi, great saintly persons, Pitra, the inhabitants of Pitraloka, Bhutani, and the other living entities, Daityaha, demons, Deva Anugaha, the inhabitants of other planets, following the principles of the demigods, Swayam, independently, without asking permission from Indra, Prati Jagmuhu, returned, Swadrishriyani, to their respective planets and homes. Brahma, Lord Brahma, Isha, Lord Shiva, Indra Adayaha, and the demigods headed by Indra. Tataha, thereafter. Translation by His Divine Grace S.B. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thereafter the demigods, the great saintly persons, the inhabitants of Pitraloka and Bhutaloka, the demons, the followers of the demigods, and also Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the demigods subordinate to Indra, all returned to their respective homes. While departing, however, no one spoke to Indra. Purport. In this connection, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments, Bhammeshendriya dayaiti indrasya swadrishnya gamanam no prapadyate vratavad krishna eva brahma hatyo padrava praptehe Tasmat tata ityanena manasa sarovarad agatya pravartitad ashwamedhat prata iti vyakyayam. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva and the other demigods returned to their respective abodes. But Indra did not, for he was disturbed at having killed Vritrasur, who was actually a Brahman. After killing Vritrasur, Indra went to the Manas Sarovar lake to become free from sinful reactions. When he left the lake, he performed an Ashwamedha Yajna and then returned to his own abode. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada actually summarized the whole chapter. Now what happened after Indra realized that he had committed a great sin by killing a Brahman. So we'll be looking at those various 4 instances that will be happening in this chapter. And we'll also cover some of the lessons from the previous chapter to connect to this chapter. So in the previous chapter, we looked at 5 lessons. Of course, there are many more. I was able to discuss the 5 lessons. First is, we have to perform our duties, and when respect to duties, we have prescribed duties and devotional service. And as given in Ishopanishad, they go parallel. So like when Arjun, he was on the battlefield and he wanted to give up fighting because he was associating, thinking that his body is all in all. And Lord Krishna reveals to him that you as a living entity is different than the body, and the body is given to us by the material nature. So you should perform the prescribed duties, but those prescribed duties should be performed with completely devotion to me, surrendering to me. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat jihoshi tadasiyat. So devotional service is priority, because any service we do, any action we do without, dovetailing it towards Lord Krishna is shram evahi kevalam, is just useless labor. Then the second lesson we learned is, sometimes materialists think that devotees don't challenge because they are not in competition with others. Well, we have even better challenge. We challenge ourselves. We are seeking on self-improvement. We are seeking self-improvement and continue to make endeavor in that direction. So we realize that there is only one limit, and that limit is us, our senses. So we have to make sure that we are, dovetailing our senses in the right manner. The third lesson we learned is, of course, that there are 3 types of actions. So somebody can say, okay, you're talking about devotional service, you're talking about prescribed duties, so what are the other actions possible? So in Bhagavad Gita, it's revealed that there are 3 types of actions when we are under the modes of material nature. First is the prescribed duty. Then the second one is whimsical action, capricious. And then the third one is inaction. And we have to engage in one of the 3, when we are in this material world. The 4th lesson we learned is, when we are engaged in these various actions, there are always reactions. And of course, the 3 types of miseries that come our way. So we have 3 options, how we respond to those reactions. First is, either we can react immediately, or we can absorb, or the third option, which is the best option, is, or we can transform that energy that's coming our way. So sometimes if somebody says bad things to us, we immediately, respond bad, in that manner. That's a lose-lose situation. We should not look at the lose-lose situation. Second is, if we try to just absorb and sit quietly, what happens? What happens, Prabhu? If somebody is mistreating you and you just keep absorbing it and absorbing it.
The person can become irritated also.
Right. And then you become a volcano one day. You give an outburst. That's worse. And everyone thinks, oh, you're so bad. They didn't realize that you are absorbing it all the time. And you are keeping your lid off. And there's just so much building up inside. And one day it just bursts out. But the third one is, you take that negative energy if it's coming your way and turn it into positive energy. Transform it in such a way that you have a proper response that actually, influences the person who actually sent the negative energy towards you in a positive manner. And this is exactly what happened to Indra. When he had killed Vritrasur, even though Vritrasu was his enemy, he was causing all the kind of disturbances, Indra realized that he is such a great devotee. So he didn't want to fight, but then he had to fight because Vritrasu incited him, saying that your duty, your prescribed duty on the battlefield is to fight. You cannot give up fighting. He was looking for inaction. He was practically defeated. When Vritrasu had attacked him with the mace, at that time, the Vajra had fallen out of his hand. And at that time, Indra was practically defeated. And sometimes, it's also being referred that Indra was dead based on that defeat. Yet physically, he was able to kill Vritrasu because Vritrasu, after he swallowed Indra, and thinking that Indra is dead, he went into meditation. And taking advantage of the meditation, as Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reveals, Indra, who was protected by Narayan Kavach and who had Vajra, which was also endowed with the power of Narayan Kavach, he was able to cut through the abdomen of Vritrasur and then cut off his head. And it took him how long to cut off the head? 1 whole year to cut off that head because he was so huge. Vritra means one who can cover the sky. So that's why when sometimes people say Vritrasur, it can also mean Vritra Asur, that's everyone was thinking, but also Vritra and Sur, which is, a demigod. So, but he has been referred constantly as a demon, yet at the same time Indra was, surprised that he is a devotee. So this is where it comes. And when we, understand that, okay, we have to transform, then it is very important for us to have a spiritual realization. Knowledge is good. Knowledge is knowing. But realization comes from practical application, right? So it's always good when we hear that, yes, when you chant the holy name, you can get rid of the sins that one cannot even imagine in one's lifetime or many lifetimes to perform. Yet at the same time, chanting itself, helps you realize that it's so purifying. Just by raising a hand and chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. And it's so purifying. So everyone is encouraged to chant. So that's the underlying message throughout these various instances, because Lord is not different from his name. And then comes the fifth and the last lesson is we should focus on our goal. And our goal is to go back home, back to Godhead, without ignoring our prescribed duties, of course. So Vritrasur, he was focused on his goal. He knew that Lord had endowed Indra with this Vajra to kill me. He had actually surrendered to the will of the Lord. And he had understood that he will be killed in this battlefield, and he had gone into meditation. And what happens when you go into meditation? Focusing on the lotus feet of the Lord. And Vritrasur was meditating on Lord Sankarshan. So it is said in this chapter, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that he becomes an associate of Lord Sankarshan. He was meditating. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaha prayati samadbhavam yati nastatra samshaya. So Antakale cha mameva. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that whoever at the last moment of their life, at the moment of death, remembers me alone, Mam Eva, me alone. Smaran Muktva Kalivram, whoever remembers me alone, Yah Prati Samadbhavam, he attains my nature, which is, he comes back to me, to my eternal abode. And sometimes when we hear the word Vaikuntha, we think it's a name of a planet. No, it's a whole spiritual sky, because Kuntha means miseries. Where is one who's devoid of, a place that's devoid of miseries, Vaikuntha. So there are no miseries over there. And there is a very nice incident that in 1971 when Srila Prabhupada, he was going to London to the Buri Palace temple, temple. At that time, he had taken the flight. And during the flight, Srila Prabhupada, normally he would chant or ask someone to read or himself read Bhagavad Gita or Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam during the flight. On this particular occasion, Indra Maharaj, he had just become the disciple and he was reading Bhagavad Gita. He was reading from Bhagavad Gita and he was saying Srila Prabhupada, on another row with Pradyumna Prabhu, sitting, and suddenly he noticed that Srila Prabhupada was watching a movie, Charlie Chaplin's movie. And he was smiling, he was laughing at it actually. So he became disturbed, he could not understand. How could Srila Prabhupada be watching Charlie Chaplin's movie and laughing at it, enjoying it? So he asked Pradyumna Prabhu to come, and he raised his concern that Srila Prabhupada is watching Charlie Chaplin movie and he's laughing at it. Charlie Chaplin is a comedian. He used to be the silent movie maker and comedian. So Pradyumna Prabhu went and inquired from Srila Prabhupada, and then he came back and informed Indradumna Maharaj, he was named Indradumna Das at that time, that Srila Prabhupada was appreciating Charlie Chaplin's comedy because it was original. And everything comes in this material world from Krishna. And since it was original, he was enjoying, oh, Lord Krishna is so wonderful. So he was still focusing on Lord Krishna. So his focus was unison. It was very determined, very focused, very much aligned to the goal, going back home, back to Godhead. So when they reached the London airport, what they discovered is that the airline folks, they had misplaced Srila Prabhupada's suitcase. So Indradumna Maharaj, he said, okay, I'll stay back, and everyone leave for Buri place. So everyone went to Buri place. After 2 hours, he was able to recover the suitcase from the airlines. And he carried the suitcase in taxi and went to the Buri place temple. And what had happened, all the festivities were finished. Everything was done. And so he continued to take the suitcase to Prabhupada's room, and he saw the door, so he opened the door and put the suitcase in. As soon as he brought the suitcase in, he sees Srila Prabhupada standing right there. So his immediate response, and this is an exalted personality, right? He immediately paid Dandavas Pranam, right? He paid obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. And as he was paying obeisances, he felt a hard slap on the back. And then he heard Srila Prabhupada saying something, but he couldn't get it. And then he left. Srila Prabhupada left. And he is still lying on the floor, Indradumna Maharaj. And then he got up. So at that time, he looked at his godbrother who was standing close by, and his godbrother, his name was Nandakumar. He was smiling, big smile with his eyes wide open. And Indradumna Maharaj inquired, what did Srila Prabhupada said? Then, his godbrother Nandakumar revealed to him that Srila Prabhupada, he patted him on the back and said, everything is very difficult in this material world. But when you go back home to the spiritual world, everything will be very easy. So this material world, we should understand that there are constant challenges. Various endeavors that we make, there will be constant challenges, there will be constant difficulties. But, focus on your goal, focus on going back home, back to Godhead, because once you go there, everything will be very easy. By Lord Krishna's mercy, of course. Now, this particular chapter is, where all those instances, starting from Indra having upset his spiritual master Brihaspati, who left from the court, Indra's court, and demigods realized they were without any spiritual master, and they'd made Vishwarupa their spiritual master and their priest, and then ended up killing Vishwarupa because he was also making oblations in the name of demons who were from his mother's side, and which invoked, Brahmahatya at that time. And Indra was favored at that time by women, land, water, and earth. So at that time he was able to pass on the sins to these four, entities. And then Twashta, who was upset that his son Vishwarupa was killed by Indra, did a yajna, came Vritrasur, and since Twashta pronounced the mantra longer, it changed the meaning from an enemy of Indra to a personality whose enemy is Indra. And then when Vritrasur appeared, he disturbed the whole universe. So that's actually the very first lesson that we should not be disturbance to the authorities because it may have some undesirable reactions coming our way or responses coming our way. So don't be a disturbance. So we as devotees should be very cautious. And Srila Prabhupada in his purpose have again and again identified that materialists are very envious by nature. And they can cause, various kind of harms to the devotees. We have also seen at various instances where materialists have caused a lot of problems. When they don't realize and become sentimentalist, that's where the problem arises. When they are looking from an analytical perspective and trying to understand the philosophy, then all materialists are very appreciative. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purports that the parents of the devotees who had taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna, those parents who understood, who tried and made an effort to understand what Krishna consciousness is, they were actually, became very appreciative of the movement. And those parents who were just inimical and they just took it as a negative, they were constantly causing trouble. And then the second lesson we learn in this chapter is that offenses, they bear immediate reactions, while sins do not. And there was an offense that was ingrained in this particular incident, which caused an immediate reaction that Indra, even if he wanted, means he could not have gone back home. Everybody left for their home, but Indra could not. He was running away because of the sinful personified who appeared. And then the third one is, a Vaishnava is already a Brahmana, although a Brahmana may not be a Vaishnava. So we'll be looking at these lessons elaborately. But sometimes this particular third one, when we talk about, in Padma Purana it is said, Sat karma nipuno vipro mantra tantra visharadaha avaishnavo guru nasyad vaishnavaha swa pacho guruhu. One may be a Brahmana in terms of his culture and family, and may be expert in Vedic knowledge, mantra, tantra, visharada. Visharada is expert. But if he is not a Vaishnava, he cannot be a guru. This means that an expert Brahman may not be a Vaishnava, but a Vaishnava is already a Brahman. And Srila Prabhupada used to give this example, that a millionaire has hundreds of thousands of rupees, right? But a person who has hundreds of thousands of rupees is not a millionaire. So it is to understand. And there is a very nice story that comes in. There were two sannyasi disciples of Srila Prabhupada. When they were in Mayapur, they visited one of the temple in Mayapur. And when they were getting the prasad from the priest blessed them that in your next life, may you be born as Brahmana. And they were confused. So they came to Srila Prabhupada and said, how is it? We thought that we are already Brahmana, we are sannyasis. But then this personality, this priest said that next birth we should be born as a Brahmana. And Srila Prabhupada laughed at it. He said, oh, that is just like the story. And then, of course, Srila Prabhupada used to narrate so many wonderful stories, and they are the best media to pass on the message. So in a village, there was an old woman, and she had a conflict with her relatives. The relatives wanted to scrouge on her property, the farmland. So once there was a magistrate, a British magistrate who was visiting the village, so many of her friends and relatives suggested to her that she should put her case in front of the magistrate and ask for help and plead for justice. So she did that. She went to the magistrate, presented her case, and she pleaded for justice. And the magistrate immediately made a ruling in her favor. So she was very happy. She wanted to give him a blessing. And she said, may you be born a constable. May you become a constable. So may you become a constable, because in her mind, constable was the highest position she had seen. Without knowing that magistrate was a much higher position. The personality was at a much higher position. So Srila Prabhupada used this as an example to say that sometimes people are, they are thinking, and the caste system in India is based on birth. Everyone thinks the caste system based analysis is if you are born without really paying attention to what the Shastras have said. And Lord Krishna says, Chatur Varnam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasha. There is no mention of Janma, birth. It's just Guna and Karma. So what are the impacts on you based on the modes of material nature? So what modes of material nature are working on you through your senses, of course, and karma, what kind of activities you are engaged in. If you are in a warfare, of course you are Kshatriya, if that's the mentality you have. If you are very much into learning and literature and so forth, you are into Brahmana, your mode of goodness is prominent and so forth. So again, a Vaishnava is already a Brahmana, but every Brahmana, if it's not a Vaishnava, then it says Swapacho Guru, Vaishnava Swapacho Guru, but a Vaishnava Guru na sya. A Vaishnava, a person who is not a Vaishnava, is not a Guru, but in a way it's saying that is not a Brahmana. So that's how Srila Prabhupada translated. So the same word may have different meanings. We talk it almost every time, that the same word may have a different meaning. So now, when Shukdev Goswami reveals to Parikshit Maharaj that Indra did not return and he was sad, he was, feeling repentance in his heart. And Srila Prabhupada is right, that's actually a sign of a great exalted personality, that Indra was feeling so. He realized that in the battlefield he had killed Vritrasur when Vritrasur was unarmed at that particular moment. And he was in meditation. While twice before, when Vritrasur had attacked Indra, when Indra had attacked him with his club, Vritrasur easily caught it with his left hand and hit the head of Airavat. Airavat went back by 14 yards and fell on the ground. At that time, seeing that the Airavat and Indra had fallen on the ground, Vritrasur did not use the club to attack again. He refrained from attacking. That's the Kshatriya spirit. That he would attack an enemy when the enemy is ready to be able to take on that attack. Second time is when he used the mace. His one hand is already cut. So with the other hand, he hit Indra on his face with the mace, and the Vajra fell out from Indra's hand. At that time again, he was an easy target. Indra was an easy target. But Vritrasur said, pick up your weapon and get ready to fight. And at that time, Indra was shocked. So those two instances, Indra picked up the weapon and then, they fought. And Indra did not want to fight even at that time. He was thinking of inaction. He was not willing to fight because he realized that this is a great devotee I am fighting. But when Vritrasur had swallowed Indra, Indra cut off the abdomen of Vritrasur, came out, and he sees that Vritrasur is in meditation. But to satisfy everyone else, he cuts off the head of Vritrasur. It wasn't that he wanted to kill Vritrasur, it is to satisfy. However, that was not a very Kshatriya spirit, right? Because his enemy, the other warrior, is not ready to fight at this moment. And Vritrasur was in meditation. But Indra performed this act to, satisfy and please others. And that's what he did. And when he did that, he was repenting. What have I done? So at this particular moment, when Shukdev Goswami reveals that Indra did not return home and he was very sad, Parikshit Maharaj asked, why was Indra sad? Right? It's a general question. And Shukdev Goswami reveals something from the past. So when Vajra was prepared, was handed over to Indra, and all the demigods and great sages, they requested Indra to kill Vritrasur, now that he is equipped with Narayan Kavach, as well as Vajra, which is endowed with Narayan Kavach. There is no chance that Vritrasur would be able to kill Indra. And still Indra did not want to fight, because he knew that Vritrasur is a great devotee. Lord Vishnu, when he appeared, he revealed to the demigods, and especially to Indra, that Indra, he is not envious of you. He is a great devotee, and with Vajra you will be able to kill him. So Indra did not want to fight. At that time, the great sages, they identified to Indra that, don't worry, we will perform Ashwamedh Yajna. And one who performs Ashwamedh Yajna successfully, his reactions to the sin of even killing a whole world, whole universe, is nullified. Now, as we understand from Padma Puran, when you do a sin on the basis of a holy name, it is a namaprad, right? It's an offense. The seventh offense is trying to perform sinful actions on the strength of the holy name. Here, the sages have suggested him, and Indra still was not ready but to satisfy. Shri Shri Garanitaya ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan ki jai. Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anant Kori Vaishnavinda ki jai. So at that time when the great sages said that you should kill Vritrasura, and Indra was not agreeing, Indra actually had a response why he was not agreeing. He had a very logical response. He said that when I killed Vishwarupa, I was favored by these 4 entities: women, earth, water and trees. However, Vritrasura is also a Brahman. And if I kill this Brahman, what would happen? And the sages had suggested that we will perform an Ashwamedha Yajna to nullify it. But then, that's for the sin. What about the offense? The offense is that now he is thinking of nullifying the sinful reaction on the strength of the holy name. And name is not different from Lord. So, just by pleasing Lord Narayan, he is thinking of taking this action. So, Vishwarupa's incident when he had killed that Brahmana was because of the anger that arose at that moment, right? When he realized that he is actually making oblations in the name of the demons. But here, this is a planned approach. This is a pre-planned approach to perform a sin. And he is still agreeing to this sin. So there is a inbuilt offense that's there. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur reveals that this particular reaction comes out. So as soon as he kills, he's feeling sad. He realizes that there is sinful reactions coming in his way. And he sees that sinful reaction. So he has the potency. So many times when we do something bad knowingly or unknowingly, we cannot say, right, what's the reaction. But Indra was so exalted and so powerful that he was able to see the reaction. He saw that there is an old, really old Chandal woman who appeared. And her garments and her body parts were all covered by blood because she was infected with tuberculosis. And she was coughing. And her body had such a bad odor that the whole street was stinking with that odor. And Indra, seeing her, of course, did not want to get into that sinful reaction. He did not want to accept it, so he ran. Right? Well, all the demigods and everyone else had gone to their abodes. But they did not see Indra come back to his abode. So they immediately thought that Indra has left. So there is, in the Puranas, there is another aspect revealed. And since Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a summary of the Vedantas, so again it is not given in elaboration. So we will be covering some of the aspects from the Puranas as well. So the demigods thought and the great sages thought that Indra has left the heavenly planets. He has just gone away. He is feeling so repentance that he has gone away. Here Indra is running, so he went to the sky. What happened? He went to the sky thinking that maybe here this witch would not be able to come. But then he sees that witch again. And she is calling, wait, wait. And Indra is running. He's running all over the place. And then suddenly he remembers Goddess Lakshmi. She resides in the lotuses in the Mansaro lake. So he prayed to her and got her blessing. So he goes northeast to Mansarovar and he is hiding in the stem of the lotus in a subtle form. So again, this is like he has so much power. Yet at the same time, since this area is protected by the goddess of fortune, Goddess Lakshmi, the sin personified of Brahmahatya, she cannot come here. And Indra, how long did he stay there? For 1,000 years. And these are the 1,000 demigod years, not the human years. So again, he stayed there. The 6th month equals to 1 demigod day. So you can imagine how long he was there. First it took him 1 year to cut off the head of Vritrasura, and now he is there for 1,000 years in the stem. While Indra was here, something was happening in the heavenly planets. The demigods and the great sages, they were all worried They were thinking that Vritrasur, realizing that he was such a great Vaishnava, and Indra killed Vritrasur, Indra has left us. He's not coming back. So Agni, Vayu and Varuna, they are discussing in front of, in the assembly that we don't have a king right now. And what would happen if the asuras, the demons, were to attack us at this moment when we don't have a king? So they said, we need to have a king. We need a king. Flower Prabhu. Yes. So at that time, Varun Dev, Vayu Dev and Agni Dev, they were discussing. Varun Dev is the god of the oceans, the waters, the demigod. And Agni is the god of fire, and Vayu is the god of wind. And at that time, Vayu says, we need a king, and Nahuṣa could be a great king. So when he says Nahuṣa was a grandson of Pururava. So we'll be discovering, when we'll discuss Canto 9, we'll hear about Pururava and how he and Urvashi were together and so forth. And Pururava, and this is Chandravamsha, the lunar dynasty. He was in lunar dynasty. And he had a son, Ayu. And Ayu's son was Nahuṣa. And Nahuṣa was the father of Yayati. We will also be, hearing about Yayati in 9th canto. So Nahuṣa, and at that time Agni agreed, yes, Nahuṣa is qualified. He's a very righteous king. He has also performed 100 Ashwamedh Yagyas. And one of the qualifications to become Indra is to have performed 100 Ashwamedh Yagyas. And he's very righteous. He has been carrying out his duty very nicely. So all the demigods agreed. They started nodding. Yes, he would be a good king. Now it's very important to understand that the demigods are from the heavenly planets, right? Nahuṣa is a human being, right? He's a human on earthly planet. So they came to Nahuṣa's kingdom, and Nahuṣa immediately, very nicely, welcomed everyone, and they enjoyed his hospitality for a few days. So this is also, intelligence. When you're going to someone's place, you don't immediately reveal your mind. You want to see if the person is ready or not. And when Nahuṣa was sitting with them on one occasion, Agni revealed that, Nahuṣa, you know that we are without a king. And what would happen if asuras, the demons, were to attack on us at this time? So Nahuṣa said, yes, I'm aware of it. He doesn't know what is, where this conversation is going. He's agreeing with them. And at that time, Vayu says that, Nahuṣa, you should become our king. And Nahuṣa is thinking, it's a very nice proposal, but is it some kind of test? Right? That's the first thought that comes to mind. Is this some kind of test I'm being tested for? Because I'm just a human being, he reveals. And Varudev, he reveals to him that, don't worry, means we do want you to be the king. You have performed 100 Ashwamedh Yagyas. You are a very righteous king. So we do want you to become our king. And don't think that you do not have any power. Because once you become the king of the demigods, right? The heavenly king on the heavenly planets, then all our powers will combine and become your power. So you'll become as powerful as Indra. And Nahuṣa, hearing this proposal, he agreed, because he realized that when there is a battle with the demons, these powers would come handy, right? He would want to have these powers to be able to defeat the demons. So he agreed. Now there is a caution. Power pollutes, and absolute power pollutes absolutely. So in the beginning, Nahuṣa was a good, righteous king. He was performing his duties very nicely, and all the demigods, they were very pleased. However, over a period of time, seeing so much power, the personality got infected, it got polluted. And he started thinking that he is the one doing all in all. Right? Now in Bhagavad Gita we hear Prakate Kriya Marnani Gune Karmani Sarvasha Ahankara Vimudhatma Kartahamiti Manyate. Ahankara Vimudhatma. Ahankar, because of the false ego, Vimudhatma. Mudha is fool. Vimudha is big fool. Atma, a living entity, thinks that I am the one doing all these things. So that happened to Nahuṣa. And the demigods were flabbergasted. They were like shocked by this transformation. Nahuṣa would chastise and punish anyone who he thinks has not paid him proper obeisances, has not respected him properly in the court, which included demigods. He would chastise them. And he would ask the reciters and the poets to write great poems and recitations and have them, people hung them all around the palace. That he has performed this great deed, he has performed that great deed, and so forth. So he was getting polluted. But demigods, realizing that he had become so powerful, they couldn't do anything. And Nahuṣa became so powerful that he actually got, so polluted that he was thinking everything in the heavenly kingdom belongs to him. So in the palace, once he was crossing, he sees Shachi Devi. When he sees Shachi Devi, the wife of Indra, previous Indra, he thinks, oh, everything belongs to me, so she also belongs to me. And he actually stops and he says, oh Shachi, I'm the king of the demigods now. I'm the king of the heavenly planets. And you're in my palace, so you also belong to me. So he made that proposal to her, an inappropriate proposal. And Shachi, she immediately looked back. She was a very intelligent lady, so she immediately said, oh, is that so? She said, then I won't be here. And then she ordered her maidservant to prepare her things and depart to Sage Brihaspati's palace. So Brihaspati, who's the spiritual master of the demigods, he had returned, and she went to his palace and took his shelter. Nahuṣa, seeing her attitude, right? If someone thinks that they are all in all and someone else challenges them and leaves them, that's a challenge. Nahuṣa he could not do anything. He was just constantly thinking about her. Because he had this desire, Kamesha, Krodesha, Rajoguna, Samudbhava. So because his lustful desires had not been satisfied, it turned into anger. And anger turns into wrath. So now he's showing this wrath. He cannot show it on Shachi Devi because she is under the protection of Brihaspati. But whoever comes in front of him, he shows the wrath on that person. Which means all the demigods are feeling that wrath of Nahuṣa. And he sends Agni with the same proposal to Shachi Devi. So all the demigods along with Agni, they come. And in this duration, means again, the Vayu, Varuna, Agni Dev, and all the other demigods, they're searching for Indra, they cannot find Indra. And in the chapter it is described that once they do find Indra, Agni Dev, he brings the fire, the sacrificial oblations in the name of Indra. He is coming to Manasarovar, but he cannot give it to Indra. Why? Because he is Agni, and Indra is in waters. What happens when you put fire in water? It goes off. So he can't enter water. So Indra was practically starving. He was doing great austerity. He could not get any, anything to sustain his body. Yet because of the tolerance and the opulence he had gained, he was able to tolerate for 1,000 years. So in this case, Agni comes to Brihaspati's palace and reveals to Shachi Devi that, oh, Nahuṣa is causing all the trouble for us. Please solve this problem. And she says, how can I solve the problem? And that time, the spiritual master Brihaspati, he enters and he says, well, with proper contemplation, you should be able to take care of this situation. And Shachi Devi, she is understanding what Brihaspati means. She says, okay, tell Nahuṣa to come and I agree to marry him. So he should meet me immediately. Nahuṣa, hearing this, immediately is encouraged. He's like, oh, she has realized her position now. She understands that I am so powerful. So he goes to meet her and she says that I have agreed. So I'm going to do some worship for 15 days. And after the worship, you should come and, with pomp and show and marry me. He says, okay. And then he says, so, how do you want that pomp and show to be? She says, well, normally kings, they come on chariots, horsebacks, elephants. But you're the king of the demigods. You should come on a palanquin. Palanquin? It doesn't sound so appealing. She says, no, not just any palanquin. Palanquin carried by the great sages. And Nahuṣa thinks of it, yes. The great sages, they will carry this palanquin. Now that is special. So he agrees. Because of his false ego, because of his arrogance, he agrees that this is the right way. So he goes back, waiting for the 15 days, the worship to finish. During this time, Shachi Devi, she worships, and with the help of goddess Upashruti, she is able to find Indra. And then she tells Indra that he should come back, and that she has a perfect solution to get rid of Nahuṣa. And demigods will again be devoid of a king. And Indra should come back, and now he has performed enough austerity so that he will be able to come back without being caught by that sinful reaction personified of Brahmatya. And he will be able to perform the Ashwamedh Yajna and then rid of the reactions completely and attain his position. And Indra smiled at her, cleverness and her suggestion. And he agreed to her. So Nahuṣa, as soon as the worship is over, he's coming on the palanquin. Now the great sages are carrying the palanquin. Among the great sages, in the front is Agastya Muni. Agastya Muni is a short personality, right? And he is very slow compared to others because of his, bodily structure and all. So this caused some problem. Right, we hear about Jad Bharat. He was a very stout personality, but he would not step on any ant or any other, insect crawling on the ground. So he would jump, and that caused trouble to King Rahugana. So here, similar thing was happening. The palanquin was tilting on one side, and on top of that, he was slow. So there was constant jerks. So in arrogance, Nahuṣa kicked Agastya Muni. And he said, Sarpa, Sarpa, which means, go faster, go faster. And Agastya Muni, that was like the last straw of arrogance from Nahuṣa's side. He had forgotten that these great sages were more powerful than the king of heaven. And Agastya Muni, in rage, they had agreed, but they did not agree for this treatment. Said, Sarpa, Sarpa, you become a Sarpa. Sarpa means faster, but it also means snake. So that's how Nahuṣa immediately turned into snake. His body slithered and turned into snake. And then he recognized his mistake, that what he has done. And at that time, he asked for forgiveness. He begged for forgiveness. And at that time, Agastya Muni said that when you will understand the duties of a good king, then you will be relieved from this body. And it so happened that when Pandavas, they were in the forest, Nahuṣa, coiled Bhima. He captured Bhima. And he asked Bhima, tell me what is the quality of a good king, and you will be freed. But Bhima, being a warrior, he did not want to be freed just by giving an answer. He wanted to fight. Yudhishthira Maharaj understood. He's not going to give the answer. So Yudhishthira Maharaj gave the answer. And hearing that answer, the duties of a good king, Nahuṣa was able to regain his previous form and give up the body of that snake. So here, Nahuṣa has been taken care of by Shachi Devi in a very, smart fashion. It said that like a masterly stroke. In one stroke, she got rid of Nahuṣa. She got back her husband Indra. And the great sages performed Ashwamedh Yajna and recoronated Indra as the king of the demigods. And the blessings follow. So the blessings are really special in this chapter. So this is a very great narrative. There are 4 great incidents being identified. Glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan, right? And Lord is not different from his name. So that's why we chant all the time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Second is They are statements about the exaltedness of devotional service. How, Vritrasura was a great devotee, and how, Indra as a great devotee recognized another devotee. And there are devotees, like description of these devotees, like Indra and Vritrasura. And then the fourth, last but not the least, is that there are statements about King Indra's release from sinful life and about his victory in the battlefield, over the demons. So just by understanding this incident, this whole story, this narration, one is relieved of all sinful reactions. Therefore, the learned are always advised to read this narration. And what happens if one does so? It's very important. So the learned means, they are doing this. But what's the benefit? There are 5 blessings. First is that one who hears and reads this narration will become an expert in the activities of the senses, because it will reveal to the person who is understanding and reading that one has to serve Rishikesha, the master of the senses. Only then the senses can be subdued. The second blessing is his opulence will increase and his reputation will become widespread. So when we hear such narrations, it actually gives us intelligence to understand different situations. And one of the lessons we learned is, do not cause disturbance, because that can have an undesirable, reaction from others. Third blessing is, one will also be relieved of all sinful reactions, which is also given before. Fourth blessing is that one will conquer all one's enemies. And our greatest enemy, as Prahlad Maharaj reveals, is the mind. An uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy, and a controlled mind, engaged in devotional service, is the greatest friend. So it will turn all the enemies into friends, in a way. And the fifth, last but not the least, the blessing is the duration of one's life will increase. So if you want to live longer, you may do various kind of yogas. But the easiest yoga to perform is bhakti yoga. And just by hearing and reading this narration, your lifespan increases. And this narration is so auspicious that in all respects, learned scholars regularly hear and repeat it on every festival day. So this is where this ends, Srila Prabhupada reveals in his purport. So of course, this is glorifying devotional service, and of all, is glorifying the holy name, the chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. So this is where the chapter ends. Any questions or comments? Gantra Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Janant Kori Vaishnav Vind ki jai, Nitaya Go Premanande, Hari Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.